Well, I was having some insights come to me, which is how this works, about music lately. And sometimes it's not that, like, oh, it's just some insights popped in. It's like something I was thinking about 20 years ago, and then a new version of it or a new facet of it comes up. And so I like to kind of connect these dots and layer it in for, one post or one kind of talk about it. The basic theme is that music and art are not just one thing, and that's obvious, but what I really mean is that they're not even just making one statement. They're making often multiple statements about different things. They're alchemizing different things together to make a new product, an interpretation of an old thing. They may be speaking from a point of view that is not the actual artist's point of view. He may be pretending, acting, if let's say he's making a song, or a painting may just be an abstraction. A play, I mean, this might be somebody else's play and a new interpretation of it. So I don't think we can put hard and fast rules on art that this means this and that means that. And we can't make assumptions about art based on what we hear. And some of those assumptions might be that the perspective of the song is written from the vantage point of the writer, that this is him speaking, her speaking. They may be conjuring up a fantasy person that has a perspective and a completely made up tale that speaks to how they feel but has nothing to do with their reality. So what I'm saying is we kind of have to suspend some of the rules of logic, or at least of jumping to conclusions and assumptions about art and artists when we're interpreting and enjoying their art. In fact, we can just enjoy it. You don't have to necessarily interpret it, but if you're like me, your mind naturally says, what's this about? Where are they coming from? Or, ooh, that's salacious. Or, wow, this makes me feel angry or happy or turned on or turned off or, riled up or relaxed. And so there's so much to speaking about art that I'm obviously, not going to summarize that in one walking around the neighborhood post. But what I mean to say is that I think we should consider how we may misinterpret art and the intention of the art and of the artist because we think we know what they mean, who they are, and even what they're saying, when we often really don't. And that part of that assumption is that we think that what they're saying is one thing, and it means one thing, and there's no layers to it. And what I'm arguing, and I've argued before, is that there are layers and levels of interpretation on any art. And I didn't just make that up or figure that out. I think I was taught that pretty well in my kind of Baltimore County public school upbringing. That helped me. And so I kind of want to instill that. And one example of a conversation I had years and years ago, 20, 30 years ago, with someone, maybe even more, with a person. We were talking about Graceland by Paul Simon, and the person who I was talking to was saying, hey, yeah, Graceland's this place where Elvis lived, and that's what this song's about going to Graceland to see Elvis's house after Elvis died, and making a pilgrimage to see this rock god's home. And on the level, clearly it was about going to physical Graceland where Elvis had lived. But on another level, it was clearly that song was also about, a middle-aged man coming to terms with his mortality, traveling with his son and thinking back on life and romances that ended and all these things, and saying, but I'm going to Graceland. I'm on a pilgrimage of my own like everyone else is, and that we're going to end up in heaven. And so that was kind of spurring him on through these sad and painful memories, but I'm going to Graceland. So to me that was obvious because I was in school and high school or something, and in English that somebody mentioned this literary talk about levels, and and meanings and illusions and stuff like that, where other, one novel might have biblical allusions, allude to the Bible and other books and references and such things, such that art ends up taking on a three-dimensional, or at least a multi-dimensional quality, as opposed to just being a flat thing. Hey, I'm going to write a song about going to visit Elvis's house, with my son. No, what Paul Simon was seeing is that the micro and the macro can connect like that, and that we can and see deeper into something, and we can talk about something on a surface and impart a deeper meaning via speaking about Graceland, and then the religious undertones that belong there, and that one can explore those things in a covert manner. So, art, and any art that you encounter, might look like a small house on the outside, and then when you open the door, it's bigger inside. And so I think we diminish and oversimplify and write off art and artists at our peril, because we misunderstand, but we also may diminish their importance, or their meaning, or their intention, or act like their meanings and intentions are oversimplified, or just so simple, when they're a three-dimensional person too, and then their art was a three-dimensional creation that might have had multiple meanings and might have woven together all sorts of fragments from their life in order to be a composition, to compose, to bring disparate things together, to create meaning and to create a new thing from other things. So again, that alchemical idea keeps popping into my head, to take our pain, the lead, and turn it into gold. And so certainly some of these songs, and Graceland would be just a good example, are this person turning the lead of his life, that marriage breaking up, into the gold of this beautiful song that touched our hearts, and that was musically interesting, and that was inspiring, that was devotional, and that was designed to soothe his soul about his loss and remind him that he, based on his spiritual beliefs, he was bound to go to heaven, and then maybe we'd all be together there, and that type of thing. So what an amazing piece of art. And that's really not anywhere close to one of my favorite songs or anything like that, but what I'm really honoring there is the art and the artist, and the way he was able to weave all that together for something that distracted and kept entertained us, millions of us, and but that also created a new thing. It was enjoyable on its own. Even if you didn't speak English and didn't know what he was saying, you could just turn that on and be like, oh, this feels nice to my body, to my ears, and then to dig into the complexity and the levels of the message is a whole new product that is valuable and valid. And so something was created there out of these other things. And somebody else might reinterpret Graceland, I don't know, as a heavy metal band or whatever. So we can always repurpose for new things. And that's, again, that alchemy idea. And so it reminds me of another thing where Jon Stewart, years and years ago, on Comedy Central, on Daily Show, was saying how we need to unpack things, and then also talking about narrative. And I was saying, gosh, I never even thought about whether I understand reality and news and things. Somebody said, oh, they're selling you a narrative. I thought, gosh, I hadn't even considered that that's a frame of reference that now I can use. And so I realized, wow, I've got to consider whether these narratives are even true. And so, but we can also look at the narrative of Graceland and say, and just kind of flatten it out into just, again, just, hey, I'm going to this physical place when that art is three-dimensional, but as well the idea of unpacking, whether it be a political concept or a term or a human or their art, we must unpack it. And by unpack, I literally mean we have this flattened out thumbnail or zip drive of something, and we must look at it and say, okay, that is its completely compressed version for the simplicity and mobility and for the ability to communicate about it. But it's just a symbol of what the thing is, and the thing is far more complex and needs to be unpacked. So I agree with the idea of talking in terms, or you could, instead of calling me Jason Perry, you can call me JP. It's compressed. But even that, my name or these initials or this zip drive or this thumbnail isn't the thing. The map isn't the territory. The map is a representation of the territory. And in the same way, our initial understanding of, or someone else's flattened understanding of art or the artist or an idea or a politician or our planet or our spirituality must be reinflated and unpacked and be allowed to breathe and seen as a complex entity in and of itself that defies over simple descriptions and kind of a rubber stamping of our first take on something, a hot take. And these are the things that kind of dominate our culture right now. Your initial results, your initial response is how you feel, your first feeling, your first interpretation, because we don't have the attention span to give something its due, give an artist its due, a politician, ourself, our friend, a book. Oh my gosh, reading a whole paper book. I read Lord of the Rings when I was 17 or something like that. That was like such an undertaking. But it also was such a world builder for me that now I think, whoa, I did that, and I was able to go into Tolkien's world. He created a world in my head. We had to create it in his head, and then he put it on paper. So if I look at the book, Lord of the Rings, and hold that paper book in my hand, I don't know anything about Tolkien per se by the cover. One can draw the wrong inference and say, well, this Tolkien must have been a bookbinder, So we can always misinterpret. Our minds are built to misunderstand, and we have to choose to look at things anew and say, wait a second, I don't know anything about what I'm seeing here. I've got a beginner's mind about art, because art imitates life and life imitates art. So I've got to be able to say, I don't know what he meant here. I don't even know that he was singing or speaking or writing or painting from his own perspective. So I know nothing. Let's walk in and act like I know nothing, and then that'll suit us. So some of the tools we would use are just with art, and then with any other venture where we're investigating, is to unpack. Is to say, this probably needs some unpacking. Instead of throwing, opinions at each other or hot takes or someone else's short form version of something that leaves out nuance and context and meaning. And wow, that really ADHD is cool, So I just needed to say that about art and life in general, because that's been bugging me. And there's a couple other scenarios where I thought it was interesting. And Billy Idol's I got a couple songs. I've been getting into Billy Idol recently, and I saw a movie, not a movie, but a video about his life in retrospective in music, and I thought he was just absolutely charming and funny and cool and humble, but also those songs were just so good, and they were just damn good. And they were good because they were taboo and they were fun and they were exciting and kind of masculine and punk and but yet he had a soft side on some of these like Eyes Without a Face. But Eyes Without a Face and Sweet 16 really typify what I'm talking about when it comes to unpacking and about multiple meanings and multiple levels and not knowing where someone's perspective is coming from. You could get into a whole video about Billy Idol with Taboo and why these songs are so electric and absolutely lost nothing since 1985 or whatever, and maybe gained from there. So, Eyes Without a Face was just an example of a song where, in French, it's Les Sans Visage, which was terrible French, but Eyes Without a Face in French. It was a movie, like, kind of Hitchcock era movie. And so he wrote that, a song about it in English, Eyes Without a Face. Oh, that's a neat topic. And then he made it about like missing his girlfriend and all this stuff and dating. And so, it's not just like it's not like it just appeared out of thin air. It's an amalgam of things. And so it's just fun to think how people take these disparate things and put them together, like I'm doing with this video. And then the song Sweet 16, I thought, well, gosh, that song's really catchy. Ooh, I feel it. There's mystery, there's sadness, and all this stuff. But also, Sweet 16, well, he's an adult, and he's talking about somebody that's 16, like, that's inappropriate. So I thought, I don't want to like that song. Well, then I looked into why he wrote it. He wasn't talking about him dating somebody that was too young for him. He was talking about, missing his girlfriend on the road, and they were both adults. But he was talking about the guy who built Coral Castle, and the story behind it was how this person rejected him, and then he moved to America, and he built this Coral Castle in her honor, and she never came to see it. But that when people asked why he built it, that it was for his Sweet 16. So Idol was like honoring this man's sadness and loss and rejection, and the art that he created for her. Coral Castle was art that was in honor of this person he loved. And this little 100-pound man built this absolutely amazing property, supposedly just by hand, with these multi-ton monolith coral, slabs. But so Billy Idol took all that in an homage to him and missing his girlfriend while he was on the road and being a rock star, made Sweet 16. And you feel Billy Idol's pain, and you feel the dude's pain that built that stuff. And then, it's named after this thing that he just kept repeating. But somebody could walk up and be like, ooh, Billy Idol's a pedophile. Like, no, he's not, of course not. But you have to look into and figure out what was really going on there. So art is inviting you in and say, what is this about? And I guess somebody could be writing about something more taboo like that. But that taboo title, catches the ear and makes you say, that's haunting. There's something haunting about this Sweet 16, this time of innocence that this person was alluding to. And so, and you could ask Billy Idol and he could tell you, oh my gosh, there's 17 other levels to this. So we fool ourselves and each other often with our misinterpretation of art and or our projection of meaning onto it that is not there, based on assumptions that our brains just do and our minds do and our worldview. We project our own worldview onto something that isn't there and that wasn't intended. Another good example would be Black Sabbath. Was it War Pigs or like Black Masses and all this stuff? People thought that they were like Satanists or doing black magic, and they're like, no, we're actually singing about to not do that. And I guess Ozzy bit off a bat's head or did whatever he did at one time, and people really believed in that stuff. But these guys are like, no, don't do black magic. So there can be a whole mythos around someone or something or some behavior or some song, some band, some movement that's just untrue. And so we don't know how to discern truth from fiction and falsehood. And so when watching somebody else's art, it's another way we do that. We can be absolutely wrong about a politician or a friend or a writer or, an author that gets death threats because he he wrote a book that seems to offend a religion or something like that. So I know I'm getting pretty far afield here, but I think these were some great examples of people absolutely believing the wrong thing and drawing the wrong inference about art, and how it allows people to dehumanize the artist, reject the art, when the art might be speaking a totally different message and have a totally different intention, or that there may be many interpretations, or the artist may say, I'm never telling you, and you're never going to know. And art, so what art is doing is saying, especially art that won't tell you its intentions and its meanings and its and ways to interpret it, is that you're left there with yourself. The art is confronting you with yourself. And that's another insight of mine that I was psyched about. I'm sure somebody else figured that out many times before me, but when that dawned on me, I shared it with a girl who I later dated, and that was like my ticket to this person. Was like, okay, you're in, you know. I'll go on a date with you, because that was a cool insight, and she was, and as an artist. And so I don't think we realize or want to realize that art is a confrontation with self. And it's especially easy to not feel like we're being confronted with ourselves when we're reading something that has a narrative that doesn't appear to be about us. But then when you're dealing with art that is abstract, it's more obvious that this is like about me and my interpretations, and that my interpretations are not always our interpretations are not always accurate, and that they end up being usually more about how we tend to project our meanings, draw the wrong inferences, and go where we want to go with it, and interpret and see it how we want to see it, and misunderstand that we're kind of like doing a Plato's cave thing with art and with interpretation in general in life. And so we could take that opportunity to say, okay, not only do I not know what Billy Idol meant here, and my summation doesn't necessarily do it either, but that furthermore, what I'm really encountering is my worldview, my unhealed trauma, my opinions, my biases, my unhealed parts. And that this art is an opportunity for me to see such things, to do this Plato's cave thing, and say, well, where am I? What came up for me and why? So while the art can be an exploration of the artist, his and her intention, and the work, and then this amalgamation of things for the sake of enjoyment and pleasure, so can that art be about an actual, absolute, and unwelcome confrontation with self. And we don't like that sometimes. We don't want to see our ugly stuff presented, our traumas presented, our fears presented, our biases presented, our hatred presented to us in the form of the mirror of the artist's art. And then we can blame that artist and say, he's these things and she's those things, and to have an intifada against him for daring to say the name of Allah, you know. And that's, you know, we get like that. We have these sacred cows, and art often stokes these things in us. And so I guess, since I've gone to so many different places here, I just mean, like, don't think you know what's going on with someone else's art. Find out what's going on with someone else's art if you want to know what they meant. Unpack their art out of respect and reverence for them and their process and what they were trying to share with you. And when you're dealing with something and you want to go to all these places, figure out why. And when someone won't tell you what, when there's no unpacking to do of their art and their meaning and their intention, because that's the form that their art is taking, realize that you are arriving at you, and that this external exploration of this person's art is also simultaneously transporting you internally to you and to your sometimes ugly places. It might also transport you to your beautiful places too, or maybe they're all the same, but it's transporting you to the shadow and to things you can't see and don't see and won't see as well, and that is a victory, and that is a gift and a blessing if you would recognize it as such, so that you might say, aha, I do have unhealed places. This is really about me. I was projecting these things onto the art and the artist, and I do need to explore what this thing means. Can I synthesize this shadow into self? Can I grow from this? Can I become more? Can I heal these unhealed pieces? Can I get these soul fragments back? And then can I reassess that art and my worldview and etc. and come out of this greater? And then can I have catharsis from this? Can I share what this person meant and say, aha, this meant these things to, this touched this part of me. This person lost a lover and I've lost a lover and I feel this. And so can we be more present when we view art and when we experience life, so that we're not merely assuming that we are, a reliable narrator of our experience externally and internally? And can we realize that our external experiences really do mirror the internal, and that art in the same way is really not just one thing. And Billy Idol didn't just mean one thing, I miss my girlfriend. He was also doing an homage to this person who missed his love, and he was connecting to these things. And that's how life is, and that's how art is. It's all of those things at once. When I'm interacting with my lover, I'm interacting with myself. When I'm interacting with my cat, I'm interacting with the universe and spirit. And I could see this kind of spirit in her eyes the other night, this cat, that was so timeless and universal and deep. And I thought, oh, it's the whole thing's alive. And so it's just, how present are you willing to be to say, I'm going to humanize this artist, and I'm going to unpack their art, and then I'm going to realize that by doing so, that I'm also now able to be transported into these fantasies and these other worlds and these fictitious characters and whatever that my mind can do, but that I can also be transported into myself, to places that I can't get to or that are forbidden, that would be locked away. So art is that unlocking, so that we might go to where we couldn't go just by saying, okay, I want to find my shadow, or I want to heal my inner child, or whatever. And sometimes art can have the capacity to do all of those things and rehumanize us and reconnect us to ourselves. So let's not look at it like, I know what's going on here, I know what this person meant, or this is just this, that is just that. It's like a time to reconnect and see that there's more going on than we know, and that if we're going to be in like present moment awareness, we might really gain by interacting with art. I mean, you can also just turn on a Billy Idol song and just rock out, like, awesome. You don't have to do the deep thing, the deep dive into it, but that all that's available, and that it's not just one thing. It's not just the thing you think, or the thing you thought, or this other person thinks. It's not just your snapshot. It's something worthy of unpacking and exploring for our benefit. And so when people want to limit art and burn books and limit access to, or make an X rating on this, or have you, I'm thinking, hey, where did you even get the idea that that's needed, when this art has so much power and capacity, and when you don't necessarily know what that person meant by it. So when you want to limit access to or burn or remove or destroy someone's art, are you also speaking maybe that you have parts of you that you're not allowed to access, that are not acceptable? So are you now diminishing your capacity to connect with self in the same way that you want to limit my access to this person's art and to the thoughts that they have that might be valuable to me? So are you also cutting yourself off from forbidden parts of self? And again, I'm not the guy with the answers. I hope that today I was the guy with the questions, which is kind of becoming my schmaltzy little theme. But I hope that I can raise that question so that we can increase our capacity to understand our experience on the planet. And in that, I think that there's a philosophical, but mostly political movement that is designed to mess with and limit and flatten our capacity to understand what's going on in the world, and to make us believe certain things and hate those people and that type of thing. Art can really kind of blow that up and just kind of like reinflate us to our full capacity. Not even just because we have to do that deep dive into our Plato's cave and search for our soul parts and all that kind of jive or psychological stuff, but that just by experiencing art, we can just kind of shake off the spell of propaganda or hatred or tribalism or all the things. And we should say false tribalism. Like, tribes are cool, being in tribes is okay, but the tribalism I'm speaking of politically is a false tribe. It's trying to make these pseudo tribes of skin color or sexuality or something like that, where you don't have to be limited by those things. But conversely, how the affiliation with tribes, when you are someone who's been underserved and marginalized, is very different than me being like the white guy tribe, or that type of thing is different because of the context. As an aside from my ADHD Monday morning brain. So today, the final thing I'll mention about music is I was listening to on YouTube a woman who's classically trained. I think it's called Virgin Rock, and she's kind of alluding to the fact that she's like a rock and roll virgin because she was so classically trained and never listened to it, and now she's exploring these rock and roll songs and really just enjoying it, interpreting them through the lens of, hey, I'm a classical musician and these things are better than I thought, even though they're not classical. So we were listening to today Highway Star by Deep Purple, and I was just absolutely electrified by it, and it was like I heard it for the first time. And I remembered the first time I heard it when I was in high school, and I was like, this song just never ends, and it's so rocking, and it's so keyboards and perfect guitar, and my car is so awesome. And it was just like such a tour de force of like kind of masculinity and like just a romp through like in your like 20th century American male life out on the road on the highway and jamming and just feeling like super alive. And I was like, oh my God, you could feel like that, like he's talking about. But the way it made me feel in my body was just like, yes, it's like a drug. And today when I heard it, it just gave me this full body shiver a couple times. And just even thinking about it sent me that shiver again. And I'm like, wow, music seems to just be a spell breaker of some sort. And so we should just like let it do its thing to us as well as not pretending we know what the guy meant. And then we can do the deep dive into ourselves and we can unpack their art. But sometimes we just have to let the art like do its thing to us, like it's a medical treatment. And I needed the medical treatment that Highway Star had for me today. And I was so thankful for it that I wanted to share, that it just felt like it cleansed me. And I was realizing, oh gosh, I don't even listen to music enough. And that when I get down or whatever, that music can just be this magic pill. And I'm in a band that I play in a drum circle, but sometimes that your own music can just be like a thing you do and a pattern. But what a pattern breaker Highway Star was for me today. And it reminded me, like, I just don't know what it is. I don't know the nature of music. I don't know the nature of art. And I'm a lover of arts, and I'm a lover of plants and animals, and as I'm approaching my 50th birthday, I'm sitting here saying, gosh, I don't even understand this life I'm living. But the things that come true to me, or that become obvious, that I keep going back to, are there's things that make me feel alive, and they make it feel joyous to be alive. And the connection to people and animals and plants are definitely real. Like if an animal falls asleep in my lap while I'm watching a movie, whew, that feels good to me. A hug, a cuddle, an I love you, a kiss, a talk, planting a tree, pruning a plant, taking care of a yard, going out into the woods. These things are real. These things make me feel good. But music is another one of those things. And I don't need a pet or an animal or a human or a plant or nature to turn on that music and say, wow, this thing just washed over me. And so sometimes we just gotta let it wash over us. Sometimes we have to challenge our preconceptions. Sometimes we have to unpack the music and say, hey, this person was saying this. Oh, that's even more interesting. Or this novel means this, or he was alluding to that. There's so much more going on with them and their art that we need to give it its due. And then we might need to say, wow, what is this trying to tell me? What a gift that this music, this art can do all these things, and can be this amalgam of all these things, that it can take our pain and suffering and turn it into this haunting work of art that makes us cry and gives us catharsis and gives us a sense of connection with the artist, that makes us not feel alone anymore. And so in a time where we can feel so alone, feel so sad and disconnected and tribalized and such, and atomized, that music and art in general can be one of these things that now reconnects us to our path, our purpose, to others, makes us realize that those brothers and sisters that we think of as our enemies aren't our enemies. And we can kind of have a cleansing routine, and we can kind of find a sense of spiritual reconnection through them. And it's for free. Like, you just turn the radio on, it's like that. Turn on your CD, turn on your MP3 player, turn on YouTube, turn on Pandora, whatever you've got, and you can just use it to break down those barriers that seem to be kind of coming up around us in this very modern world. So I just want to kind of be thankful for art and artists and the magic that they can provide. And I just touched on, a few facets of that magic, and I'm sure you guys can think of others. So I hope that was a helpful treatise as I walked around the neighborhood on my pet sitting day.